Good morning, everyone. For starters, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and mute your microphone. But I thank you all for joining us for this virtual briefing on the 2024 Total Solar Eclipse. This event is known as the Great American Solar Eclipse, and it is set to cast its shadow over Temple on Monday, April the 8th. So Temple is one of the cities in the path of totality, and there is anticipation for an influx of thousands of spectators to our city and our region. The city of Temple has been diligently preparing for this event over the past year. And today we're happy to bring you an update from Jennifer Henager, the Program Manager of Emergency Management with the Temple Fire and Rescue Department. So since assuming her role in April of 2021, Jennifer brings a wealth of experience in emergency management dating back to 2007. Her involvement spans diverse incidents from supporting hurricane evacuee sheltering to assisting in the response to the Fort Hood shootings to managing the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and Winter Storm Uri. Beyond her professional commitment, Jennifer is a wife and a mother of 2 daughters. She is also an active member of the Academy ISD Safety and Security Committee and plays an integral role in her church. But our program won't conclude there. Following Jennifer's update, we'll hear a crucial message about eye safety during the event from Dr. Calvin Eshbaugh, Chair of the Department of Ophthalmology at Baylor Scott White Health. Dr. Eshbaugh completed his residency at Scott White in Temple 25 years ago. He went on to continue his education at the Cole Eye Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. He holds an MBA through the University of Texas at Austin and completed leadership education at the Cox School of Business at Southern Methodist University. He's active in his church and serves as the president of a local school board. He's been married to his wife for over 30 years and is the father of 3 sons. He was most recently promoted to grandpa earlier this year with the arrival of his first granddaughter. So after Dr. Eshbaugh's remarks, we'll have time for questions, but I will ask you that as you have a question during either Jennifer's remarks or Dr. Eshbaugh's remarks, to go ahead and type it into the chat, and we'll take the questions as they appear in the chat at the end of the remarks. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Jennifer so she can share insights into the city's preparations on the 2024 Total Solar Eclipse.
Thank you, Whitney. I appreciate the opportunity to be with y'all today and talk a little bit about this exciting endeavor that's coming our way here in just a short amount of time. We're about a month and a half out. I have been in a number of meetings, a number of presentations, discussions, but excited to be here today with y'all. Hopefully, this is fruitful for y'all. If you have any questions, like Whitney said, please feel free to put them in the chat. We hope to get them all addressed today. If you have any questions down the road, please feel free to reach out anytime. So with that, we'll get started.
That's not right.
Oh, we jumped to the middle.
There we go.
All right. So starting at the beginning. So the Great American Eclipse is occurring on April 8th, which is a Monday. If you'll go to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the path and the timing, some potential impacts that we are expecting to see, and then some planning considerations. Next slide. So just high level information here. Obviously, we've had an eclipse in October, and so I've heard a lot of, why is this one different? Why do we care? What's so special about this? This is a total eclipse, so that means that the moon will completely block out the sun for a period of time, crossing over our area. So that's just a little graphic to illustrate what that looks like. Next slide. So the path going across the United States, there we go. As you can see, it's going to basically cut up right through the middle of Texas, right across central Texas. It's going to begin its course over Mexico and shift all the way up through the middle of the United States. That path there, if you are within that path, you will experience totality. If you are close to that path, you will experience some measure of that, but not as significant as we'll experience. If you'll go to the next slide to kind of zoom in on what that looks like for our area. So the red line is the direct center. The blue lines are the outer skirts of the width of this. So as you can see, Temple falls well within that path. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a busy slide. I tell people, you know, the nerd in me gets very excited about numbers and talking about spans of time and things like that. The lazy person in me goes, why in the world is this important? So the duration of the totality is 4 minutes. It's less than 4 minutes. It's 3 minutes and 52 seconds. It will begin at 1:36, end at 1:40 for Temple. However, the partial begins all the way at 12:19. So that's when the moon is beginning to cover the sun, and it won't end until 3 o'clock. So the full duration is getting close to 3 hours in length. Next slide. So what kind of impacts are we talking about? When we first started looking into this, we did a lot of research. There was a total eclipse in 2017, excuse me, up north, kind of came down Washington, Wyoming, and went across the United States in the northern area. So we pulled a lot of information from there. We talked to a lot of people from there, try to get a good handle on what we should expect. What does that look like? Total eclipses are not very common in the same area. They occur fairly often, but not in the same place. The next one for us, I may or may not even be alive at that point. So it's not going to be a frequent thing. What should we expect? The biggest impact all surrounds population surge. So we're talking 2 to 3 times our population for Bell County. That puts us over 1 million people. That's a lot. That is a ton of people in this area. Our infrastructure is not built for 1 million people at this time. We don't have anywhere close to that size population. So with more people, we are expecting transportation challenges, whether that's on the road, if that's in the air, or even on the waters. We're expecting a huge increase on our lakes, having folks out in the water, thinking that might be a cool place to watch, which it probably would be, but lots of crowding everywhere. Potential fuel shortages. We have more vehicles in town. They're going to need gas. So potential shortages there, grocery shortages, just a higher demand in people visiting the shelves at the local grocery store. We, on an everyday basis, we have medical emergencies. We have strokes. We have heart attacks. We have people who are in accidents, vehicle accidents. So we have kind of our standard number of medical emergencies that we have on any given day. With more people, we expect those numbers to increase, which could mean that our already oversaturated ERs will be completely inundated at that point in time. It will be a challenge for our water and wastewater systems, just higher usage, higher demand. Debris management, I put that on there mainly because folks don't always tend to find a trash can if there's not one convenient. And so if you have a ton of people pulled off on the side of the road or camped out in a parking lot or wherever the population stops to view the eclipse, there will be an increase in debris. Civil unrest is always something that we want to keep tabs on. When we visited with the folks up north about the 2017 eclipse, they really didn't see a big increase in crime or anything like that. It's just something that we want to keep on our radar, that more people, it increases the possibility, although we are not expecting any issues. There have not been any concerns or information that our law enforcement agencies have received that are leading us to believe that we will have anything or to expect anything. It's just something that we want to keep tabs on. Cell service, more people, more cell phone calls, more text messages, more live streams on social media. Our cell towers will probably be taken to their knees, so to speak. Our normal 4th of July parade that we have in Belton every year, that I know probably a lot of you have visited probably once or a couple times. Normal event last year, I talked to the Belton Fire Chief, and the cell towers were inundated. They went through it was a brief period of time, but people couldn't make phone calls. So what does that messaging look like? We want to make sure that if people need to call 911, they know that they can text 911. But also in thinking about our day-to-day operations on the business side, how do you reach your people? How do you get in contact with your vendors? How do you call somebody in for work? How do you do those things if you don't have cell phone capability? My chief of police likes to joke that we're going back to 1985. So if you have a pager system, I know there are a very small group of businesses that still use pagers. Those will still be fine, but cell services will be a challenge. We do have a hot mic. If you can mute your line, please.
That's talking about the water and the wastewater.
All right, good deal. And then in public information, so we are working to make sure that we have messaging, that we're getting messaging out to the business community as well as our residents, but also thinking about our visitors coming in. You know, when you visit an area that you're not familiar with, maybe their Facebook page or their website, how do you get messages in that area? Well, it's typically the local news service. So we will have press releases available. We'll be in close contact with our local media folks, trying to make sure that pertinent messaging is out and available as folks are visiting this area. Next slide, please. So what are some planning considerations? Thinking about that major arteries will come to a standstill. That is almost a guarantee. I would feel confident in saying that you should expect no movement, at least for the totality. Again, that's a brief period of time, but we have several major arteries in Temple that folks will not be aware, and they may pull off on the side of the road until that's no longer an option, and then they will literally just stop in the middle of the road. We heard even from the partial, the annular eclipse that was in October that was not to this scale, that people just stopped in the middle of a road, major interstate, just stopped and got out of their car and stood there and looked up, which that, as you can imagine, there's not going to be movement at that point in time. So maybe thinking about
in other cities, people have just stopped on interstate to watch the eclipse.
We have another hot mic.
So I listened to the first.
So thinking about maybe planning your travel earlier in the morning, later in the day, we do expect that when we essentially are expecting 2 rounds of mass exodus is what I've been calling it. So after the totality, there are folks that they like to chase the eclipse. They like to try to stay in the darkness. So as soon as the totality has passed, those folks are going to take off. There are going to be a number of people that will want to watch the entire partial eclipse lasting until about 3 o'clock. So they'll hang around for a while and then they'll try to leave. So the example we've used, our 4th of July fireworks show, we have every year with the city of Temple. So over a period of hours, people trickle in, they kind of arrive as they feel appropriate, get set up, and they take their time. When the fireworks show is over, everybody wants to go home at the same time. So we are fully expecting that to be what we are seeing at the end of the eclipse, is for everybody to try to leave at the same time. So as you can imagine, everybody trying to move, they're not going to get very far very fast. I did see, just as a frame of reference, an individual who lived about 30 minutes from where she viewed the eclipse in 2017. It took her 3.5 hours to get home. And that was in a more rural area. So that was just, to me, that spoke volumes to the length of time that people could be stuck on the road. we talked a little bit about cell service, so making sure that you have ways to reach your folks. If you do have walkie-talkies that are line of sight or even on our radio system, like our first responder radios, we are not expecting any issues with radios. It's mainly the cell service. Thinking about another way to communicate. In our emergency operations center, I've made sure that we have some landlines. You know, landlines are not a current thing much anymore. A lot of people don't have landlines. They rely on their cell phones. But if you have the ability to use one or can have people posted by a landline to make those important phone calls, I would strongly encourage you to consider that. Fuel shortages, if you can have your vehicles filled up in advance, or you have a way to have fuel on site or an alternate method of receiving fuel, think about those things. I would not recommend trying to get fuel day of unless you just don't have a choice. And then our police department, they will be prioritizing calls. So criminal trespass, that will be very low on the priority list. So if you have a big parking lot that you are not able to secure and you have people coming in and trying to park there, by no means am I saying that they won't come. It will just take them a while to get there. They are going to be responding to emergencies in a more expedited manner. But things like the criminal trespass, those will take longer to get there. Thinking about your staff, if you have folks, I know within the city, we talked about, you know, our mowing crew or our Transform Temple folks, those people who are normally mobile in their day-to-day jobs, do they need to be reassigned for the day? Do they need to have something where they're not trying to fight the traffic? Do we have the ability to do some remote work? Can we encourage people to stay home? Those are some discussions and things that we've explored at the city level that I would consider, or I would ask that you consider for your businesses. Trying to keep people off the road as much as possible. We've even had a number of school districts who have opted to either change up their calendar, change days, or they had enough minutes in their calendar to have that day off so that we don't have buses out in the traffic adding to the congestion. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Eshbaugh to talk about some eye safety.
All right, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Somebody just nod your head, Whitney, if you can hear me. Okay, there you go. Okay, so shout out to my wonderful bride who came up with this title, I Want to See the Eclipse. And yes, I'm an eye doctor, so thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Next, got to start with a little bit of anatomy of the eye so you understand what we're talking about. The cornea is the clear front window of the eye. LASIK is done on the cornea. The lens is behind the iris, behind the pupil. That's what, when that gets cloudy, that's what a cataract is. But the retina is all the way in the back of the eye. It lines the inside of the back of the eye, the central portion of the retina we call the macula. And in the center of the macula, that little pit, that little depression is called the fovea. And the fovea is where your cones are packed in very tightly. And the reason there's a depression and it's thinner there is because there are less support cells, less nutritional cells, so that the best light can get through to the cones. And that's why you have your best color vision, your best clarity when you look straight at something you're using your fovea. So on the next slide, we can see what happens with solar retinopathy. And I sent these slides to our, excuse me. So this would be a normal eye. On the red circle on the side there, that's looking right at the retina in the center there, the fovea. And then the two pictures to the right would be the equivalent of like a CAT scan or MRI scan. That's very simplistic. But those are scans of the retina, and you see the fovea, the little dip. These are completely normal pictures. And I'd like to say, these pictures I just downloaded from the internet. These are from public domain. These are not Scott White patients that I'm showing you here. Now the next slide. And I started with our marketing department, and they were very, very helpful and added these yellow circles to show us where the pathology is. And that made me think that before any time a patient comes to see us, they should go to marketing first. So marketing can put yellow circles and tell us what the problem is. I'm kidding. I love our marketing people, but you see that just, it looks like a tiny little yellow dot right there in the center of the fovea. That's basically a sunburn from staring right at the sun. And then on these scans, you can see how it kind of blisters and you lose your cones, you lose your vision cells. And so the issue is they don't grow back. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So next slide, doctor, what can I do to potentially look at things? Well, I've heard friends and I've read on the internet, what about welder's mask and welder's goggles? The problem there is those welder's mask and goggles come in lots of different shades. They apparently go through 2 through 14. I'm not an expert on this. I just read this. And the reason they exist is because different welding jobs require different wavelengths and different tools and different gases to generate the arc. So they'll generate different wavelengths, and not all goggles can block all wavelengths. And what I've read, shades 12 and 13 might be okay. Shade 14 is known to be okay. Okay, next slide. So Dr. Eshbaugh, what about these glasses that I can go on Amazon or other websites and order specific eclipse glasses? And I've already got some. Well, some of the clues you can look for to see, so I've read, so we've been told to see if they're good enough. When you put the glasses on, you shouldn't be able to see a bare light bulb. It's completely dark. They're significantly darker than your regular sunglasses. But then also, if you click on the next slide, well, Dr. Eshbaugh, I've read about this ISO 12312-2. That stands for International Organization for Standardization. And the ISO says if they have this number and they're up to this level, then they're acceptable to look at the sun according to the ISO. Click that button one more time there, Whitney, and we're going to stay right here for just a second. So the but, and I'm partially sorry, not sorry, I'm going to be a buzzkill here. What's the problem? We've all ordered things on the internet, correct? And sometimes you get what you think you're getting, and sometimes you don't get what you think what you're getting. And there are reports in our literature, and our retina doctors have gone to meetings, eclipses in other areas of the country and around the world, in years past, getting these specific labeled glasses that are okay, and they're fakes. They're not real. You can't tell just because it's got that ISO number stamped on there. Is this really real? Is this really going to help me? The first glasses I showed you, the black one, have no number on that. I just ordered that on Amazon for $5. I don't know if it's legit or not. The welder's glasses, you go down to your cousin Bob's workshop and borrow his welder's glasses, or cousin Sally, her welding glasses. I don't know how to tell if it's a shade 8, shade 10, shade 14. I assume it's printed on there, but will everybody double check that? I don't know. So what I'm going to wrap up here with, this is on a personal note. I'm sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. The central scotoma. So if you lose those cells in the center, this is what you can be left with, losing your vision right there centrally. Now, it can get a little bit better over time, but you will have permanent damage because those cells don't regenerate. It can take 12 to 24 hours for visual loss and visual changes to start showing up. So that's the problem. You can get permanent damage without the proper eyewear, and nobody can really guarantee you if you do have the proper eyewear or not. So now I was going to say, on a personal note, as a board certified ophthalmologist and on behalf of Baylor Scott White, go ahead, click on the next one. Again, I got ahead of myself. You can make a pinhole projector. The little pin and a piece of cardboard, a hole, let the light shine through. Hit the next slide, next button. This is an example of a lady making a little pinhole, and there's the arrow to show you what you're going to be looking at on the ground there. And one more button here, this little spinning in here. If you Google box projector, there's something else you can make as a way to see what you want to look at. I'm sorry I got so far ahead of myself. Now the next slide. We cannot in any way recommend, do not look directly at the sun for any reason, no matter what you're wearing over your eyes. It is not worth the risk. It's better to be safe than sorry. You can induce permanent damage. What about photography? My iPhone. There are special cameras and filters to take that. Let the pros do that and Google the next day and look at those pictures later. So I'm sorry, I stumbled there on my slides a little bit, but that's our official recommendation and opinion. It is not worth the risk. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both Jennifer and Dr. Eshbaugh. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the chat. We did have one that came through earlier, which was about walkie-talkies and potential issues with walkie-talkies, but Jennifer did address that. Jennifer, is there anything else you care to share about walkie-talkie communication?
No, I mean, walkie-talkies are typically line of sight. There shouldn't be any significant issues with those. I do want to add one more comment as we're waiting to see if any other questions come in. So I actually just scheduled 3 general resident town hall meetings that there will be a press release next week. So we'll have one kind of during the day, one during the evening hours, and one on a Saturday. So a variety of options. So if you have folks that want to attend that, it will be geared more to residents. So thinking about, going to the grocery store earlier, getting your medications before Monday, some of those type of things. We'll be presenting those soon. So be on the lookout. Like I said, the press release will go out next week. And so you should start seeing some information about that.
Thank you. So one question was if the slides would be available to share. Those who registered for the event, I will send those out following the call. So please stay tuned for that. One is for Jennifer, when do you expect people to come into the area?
So that is a little bit of a moving target. We believe that with it being on a Monday, that folks will make a long weekend of it and start arriving as early as Thursday. So we have seen increase in reservations with hotels and Airbnbs as an example, but we fully expect to start seeing folks showing up as early as Thursday.
In a different briefing, you mentioned that all the hotels had been booked basically a year in advance, and that still stands true, obviously, in addition to Airbnbs and things of that nature.
I did learn recently from a friend of mine that they did hold back some rooms, some of the major hotel chains, and so they are releasing some as we get closer, but essentially they release a block and they book up very quickly. I believe there are no Airbnb options at this point in the area. If you go to like an Expedia or any of those type of sites, you won't hardly find any availability.
So we have one that either of you can take, Dr. Eshbaugh or Jennifer, based on your discussions with the folks that managed the 2017 solar eclipse. Was there a significant increase in ocular damage reported?
So Dr. Eshbaugh, do you want to take that and
Yes.
I can follow up with something?
The answer to everything in medicine is it depends. It depends on how you're going to define significant. I mean, if it was less than 10 people compared to hundreds of thousands that looked at it, that's may not be considered significant. If it's you, it's 100%, and that's significant. So I'll go ahead and answer another question that's jumped down here. The NASA site has a list of approved vendors of the Cook glasses. I can't speak to the quality of NASA's vendors. You have to make your own decision. It's a free country. You're adults. I'm just saying you should not look at the sun for any reason. That's our official recommendation. And I know that's a buzzkill, and I'm sorry for that, but that's better to be safe than sorry.
For the conversations I've had regarding the 2017 eclipse, they did have an increase in ER visits for people complaining about headaches, blurry vision. So maybe not long-term damage necessarily, but they did have an increase in folks coming to the ER for issues related to viewing the eclipse.
Now, one question, is there a preferred viewing location in Temple?
So we actually are not making any recommendations for viewing locations. Our parks will be open. We did block off the ability to reserve any pavilions or any any facilities that Temple normally has to rent. We did block those for the weekend. The parks will be open. I fully expect that people will look on a map and try to find green area to go to. I imagine that those will be probably some of the earliest spots to fill up.
So I'm not seeing any other questions come through. But Jennifer, I wanted to revisit a presentation you made last fall where you talked about how from an emergency response, how the county was going to be divided. And can you talk a
Yes,
little bit
ma'am.
more about that to give people a better understanding?
Sure. I have a counterpart that's over the county and then one in Killeen. Our three essentially emergency management coordinators for the municipalities. We have been trying to collaborate as much as possible for all of this, knowing that with this being considered a planned event, in the big scheme of things, that means additional state and federal resources are not available to us. We have to handle what we have here locally. It's only if it gets into a situation, if we had a major wildfire that broke out, or if we had some pretty significant civil unrest, something that would kind of steer the ship a different direction. This is a planned event up to that point. And so our local resources are what we have available to us. We have been working on with not just within our, city of Temple, city of Killeen, and some of the larger jurisdictions, but we've been trying to make sure that even the smaller municipalities and the unincorporated areas have and know who to call for assistance if they have something in their area that gets a little bit beyond what they're able to handle. How do they funnel that communication? So we took Bell County and we divided it into thirds. And so Temple will oversee essentially the east side of the county. Bell County is covering the middle section, and then Killeen, obviously the west section. And so we have essentially tried to streamline any of the communication. Any requests for needs, we'll try to make sure that we can handle within those emergency operations center setups. And if not, then we'll escalate requests to see if we can meet that need within the county.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, we will give you 30 minutes back of your day. And oh, we've got one more. Just to thank you to both you and Jennifer and Dr. Eshbaugh for the informative presentation. And I echo that. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. And again, we will share the slides with those who registered for the event. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everybody.